The candles on the table were the tall ivory kind, the sort Katrina ordered specially for occasions she'd decided mattered. There were 3 of them, burning in the draft from the front door, and I watched them from my seat at the head of the table and thought about oxygen, about how a flame that size was pulling just enough to stay lit. No more, no more, no more. Carter's had been the restaurant for these events my whole life. Graduations, my father's 50th, my cousin Brenda's rehearsal dinner, the one before the marriage that didn't last. The booths were dark leather worn soft. The lighting was amber enough that everyone looked like they were being remembered rather than seen, and the waitstaff moved with the proprietary quiet of people who understood that they were not the story. The smell was cedar and something fried, and the particular wax-and-old carpet smell of a room that has held 100 years of other people's milestones. I knew every inch of it. I had eaten here in every configuration of my life. My father sat to my left. John Barnes, 62, the kind of man who irons his shirts even at home. He had ordered the same thing he always ordered, the prime rib, medium, and he was engaged in a quiet conversation with George Aldridge from church, and his hands were folded on the table in front of him the way hands look when their owner is very certain of the room. My mother, Katrina, was across from him, managing the table the way she always managed social occasions, by being the warmth everyone borrowed when they ran out of their own. She had refilled my water glass twice without asking. She had laughed at everything. She was in the green dress she wore when she wanted people to think she was relaxed. I was 30 years old as of 6 hours ago. I was a nurse. I had come from a double shift, and my feet hurt in a particular way that I had stopped numbing. I had sat down in my own seat at my own birthday dinner, and I had begun the business of being grateful. The man I didn't recognize was seated at the bar. I noticed him the way I notice things in triage, not because anything was wrong, but because nothing about him matched the room's logic. He was 50 or so, in a dark suit that had been worn enough to be comfortable, and he was drinking water, not liquor, and he was watching our table with the patient attention of someone who had arrived to do a specific thing and was waiting for the correct moment to do it. His eyes moved to mine once and then away. Not guilty, calibrated. My father said something. George laughed. The candles dipped. I set my fork down and reached for my water glass, and the man at the bar rose from his stool. He crossed the room without urgency. He stopped at my chair, not my father's, and he said my name, Grace, with the neutral precision of someone confirming a patient's wristband, and he placed an envelope on the table beside my plate. He said, "You asked for this." He said, "I'm sorry it took this long." He did not wait for a response. My father's hand moved before I had touched the envelope. Fast, the fastest I had ever seen him move, and he had the envelope in both hands, and for a moment I thought he was going to open it, and then I understood he was not going to open it, and I watched him tear it, cleanly, across and across again, and set the pieces beside his water glass like a man folding a napkin. He did not raise his voice. He did not look at my mother. He said, "That man is a private investigator hired by people who mean our family harm." The table went quiet. Lily Prout, who had known my mother since they were both in the children's choir at First Calvary, put her hand over her mouth. Charles Downing stopped chewing. George Aldridge looked at his plate. I looked at the torn pieces of paper. The investigator's name was Edward Jones. I would learn this afterward. At the moment, he was simply still standing at a respectful distance from our table, and he had not flinched when my father tore the envelope, and he reached into the breast pocket of his suit jacket now and produced a second envelope, and set it on the table with the same unshowy care of a man who has anticipated exactly this, and said, "There are copies." Katrina cried. The sound was soft and immediate, and it arrived before anything was said, before my father could speak, before I could move, and that was the thing. I had worked alongside people in crisis for 8 years. I had held the hands of women who had just been told things they would spend the rest of their lives reorganizing around, and I knew what surprise sounded like in a body, and this was not it. Her tears were real. Her tears were also already present, the way a bag is already packed. "I am type A positive," I said. I said it the way I would present a chart finding. Not raised, not sharp. I said, "My father is B positive. My mother is B positive. I have asked about this twice and been told there was a lab error." The room held. I said, "There is no lab configuration that produces that error." My father straightened in his chair. He said my name. He said it the way he had always said it when I was about to say something he needed me not to say, with a weight in it, a kind of atmospheric pressure, the kind of delivery that had been sufficient my entire life. I picked up the second envelope. Katrina said, "Grace, honey, let's go somewhere private, let's not." I opened it. My father stood. He did not shout, did not strike the table, did not perform the scene that might have made the moment legible to everyone watching. He straightened his jacket. He put 2 fingers briefly to his collar. He said, to the table in general, "I'm going to let her process this." He said it the way you say it when you are done and you are leaving and you need everyone to believe the leaving was charitable. He walked out. He did not look at me. He did not look at Katrina. The door let in a cold rectangle of October air and closed. I sat with the envelope open in my hands, and I did not call after him. I had known for 11 years that I wasn't going to. She was in the parking lot. I almost missed her. I was moving fast, the way I move when I'm recalibrating, when the information has changed, and I need to get somewhere quiet to process it. And I pushed through the side door into the October dark, and she was standing at the edge of the lot under the yellow light with a paper bag in her hands. Not flowers. Something from a bakery, brown bag gone soft at the handles. She'd been holding it for a while. She was 50 or so, brown hair with gray in it, worn plainly. She was not performing patience, she simply had it, in the way that some people have been made patient by not having any other option. She said my name and her voice was level and she said, "I'm Anna. I don't expect anything from you. I only wanted to be here." I stood there and looked at her, and I was a nurse, and I was 30 years old, and there were 30 years of things between us, and neither of us named any of them. I said, "How long have you been waiting?" She said, "Out here about 2 hours. In general," and she stopped. The bag from the bakery was a lemon cake, individually boxed. She held it out. She said, "I didn't know if you liked lemon. I thought it seemed like something you might like." She said it without flinching, which is the only way you can say a thing like that. I took the box. I said, "I need to go back inside." She said, "I know, I'll be here." Edward Jones spread the contents of his briefcase across the table with the systematic care of a man who understands that the arrangement of evidence is itself a form of communication. Lily hadn't left. Neither had Charles or George, though George kept looking at the door. Katrina was in the restroom. I did not go to check on her. There was a birth certificate, the original, filed September 1995, listing a woman named Anna Claire Whittaker, age 19, as mother. There was a second document filed 11 days later, with the original suppressed. There were employment records. My father had been the administrative coordinator for the residency program at Crestview Regional that year. Anna Whittaker had been in her first year of a nursing program there, working clinical hours in exchange for tuition assistance. The leverage was not complicated to read. There was a letter from a family attorney, not ours. A different one, now retired, describing the terms of a relinquishment agreement signed under what the attorney had, in a private communication 20 years later, called conditions that would not pass current scrutiny. There was a fabricated no-contact order, my father's name on it, a judge's signature I did not recognize. There was a stack of envelopes, 30 of them, each postmarked once a year, unopened. They had all been addressed to me, at an address I had never lived at, a P.O. box registered in my father's name, and they had never been forwarded, and they had come from the same return address in Knoxville for 30 consecutive years. Charles Downing said, "John did this." He said it quietly. He said it the way you say something you have always half known and are only now granting the courtesy of language. Lily Prout looked at her hands on the tablecloth. She said, softer, "He ran the annual giving committee for 7 years. It was not a non sequitur. It was a woman taking inventory." Katrina came back from the restroom. She sat down. She looked at the papers, and her face was a specific kind of still, the face of someone who has decided in advance that she will not look at the papers because looking at them would constitute admission of the paper's relevance. She said, "Grace," she said, "whatever this looks like." I said, "I'm not ready to talk about it yet." She said, "I just want you to know that I love you. Everything I've done has been because I love you." The sentence had the shape of an ending. It had always had the shape of an ending. I had heard it in various forms my entire life, at the end of conversations that hadn't resolved, at the end of questions she didn't want to answer, and I had always understood it the way she intended, as a door closing, and I had always walked away. I said, "I know you love me. I let that be enough for now." It was what I had. I met with an attorney 3 days later. Her office was on the second floor of a building on Magnolia Street, plain furniture, the kind of space that is deliberately unimpressive because the work done in it doesn't need decoration. She explained the process. She said the original birth certificate was recoverable, that the suppression had been irregular, that the paperwork trail Edward Jones had assembled was sufficient to open a petition. She used the word proceeding several times. She used the word correction. I drove to Anna's apartment that evening. She lived on the east side, third floor of a building with a broken elevator, and her apartment had the quality of a place furnished by someone who had been making choices for herself for a long time. A navy couch, a reading lamp, books stacked on the floor beside the ones that fit on the shelves, a small table by the window with 2 chairs, which I registered, and then registered that I registered it. She had made coffee. She asked how I took it, and I said black, and she said me too, and neither of us pointed out the smallness of that. She put a shoe box on the table between us. She said, "You don't have to open those now. You don't have to open them at all. I wrote them because it felt," she stopped. She said, "I needed somewhere to put it." I opened the box. They were in order, oldest at the bottom, yellowed envelopes, her handwriting younger on the early ones, the same address repeated year after year in my father's Poe box. I did not read them all that night. I read the first one, dated September 13, 1995. It was not dramatic. It said, "I think about you every day. I don't know if you're happy. I hope you're happy." It said, "I'm going to be a nurse." It said, "I thought you should know that since you're half of me." I set it face down on the table. I picked up my coffee cup. Outside, 2 floors down, a car alarm went off and then stopped. I said, "She's a good woman, my mother, Katrina." Anna said, "I believe you." I said, "She kept this from me. She knew." Anna said, "Yes." I said, "And I don't know yet what you are." She said, "I know, that's fine. I've got time." Katrina texted me the Sunday before Thanksgiving. She said, "I've been giving you space and I hope you know I'm here. The house will feel empty without you. Your Aunt Lynn is bringing the sweet potato casserole, the one you like with the praline topping." She said, "I'm not asking you to forgive anyone. I just miss my girl." I sat with my phone for a while. I thought about the word my. I texted back, "I'm not going to make it this year. I hope it's a good one." I did not punctuate it cruelly. I did not add anything soft to it either. I drove to Anna's instead, which is something I had not planned until I was doing it, and she answered the door in a sweater and looked unsurprised, which is one of the things about her. She manages to look unsurprised without looking like she was waiting, and I haven't worked out yet how she does that. We ate soup. We watched something forgettable on her laptop. I fell asleep on her navy couch and woke at 2 a.m. to find she'd put a blanket over me and turned the lights off and gone to bed. And I lay there in the dark and listened to the sounds of a building that was hers, a refrigerator hum and someone upstairs and traffic on the street. And I thought about all the apartments I'd lived in and how long it takes for a building to stop being other people's sounds. The courthouse was a Tuesday in November. It took 11 minutes. The judge was an older man with a methodical quality about him. He reviewed the documents with the same attention he would have given any administrative matter, which is what it was officially. The attorney said the appropriate things. The judge asked 2 questions. He signed the order. The clerk processed the corrected certificate in an adjacent room while we waited on a wooden bench in the hallway. The attorney checking her phone, me watching a man mop a section of floor near the water fountain, working in careful overlapping circles. When they handed me the document, I looked at it for a long time. My name, my birthday, my mother's name, now Anna Claire Whittaker, the thing that was true made administrative. I folded it and put it in my bag. The attorney said something warm. I thanked her. We took the stairs down. Outside it was cold and bright. the kind of November day that is assertively ordinary, and I stood on the courthouse steps for a moment before walking to my car. That was all. That was the whole of it. I went to see Dr. Calloway that afternoon. He was semi-retired, seeing patients 3 days a week, and his office manager had fit me in because I had told her it was important, and she had looked at me for a moment and agreed that it was. He was 70, heavy-set, with the deliberate manner of a man who had spent a career delivering information he would rather not have. He knew why I was there before I said it. I could see him knowing it. He sat with it for a moment, and then he told me. He said he had flagged the blood-type discrepancy at my 5-year checkup. He said my father had called him the following day. He said the note was removed from my file, and that he had told himself at the time that it was the family's business and not his, and that he had understood since then that this was not a defense. He said, "I've thought about it many times." I said, "I believe you." I thanked him for his time. I stood up. He said, "Grace, I'm sorry." He said it the way people say it when they know sorry is a coin with no purchase, and they're offering it anyway because it's all they have left. I said, "I know. I didn't tell him it was all right because it wasn't, and he didn't need the lie." The envelope from my father arrived on a Thursday. It had been 3 weeks since the courthouse. My name and address were typed, not written, on the label, and inside was a single house key on a plain ring. No note, no letter. The key was to the house I had grown up in. I recognized the brand, the specific scratches on the bow. I held it for a while. I thought about what it was supposed to say, and what it couldn't, and whether those were the same failure. I put it in the nightstand drawer and closed it. The following October, I turned 31. We did not go to Carter's. Anna made a cake in her apartment, lemon, which it turns out I do like, and she had frosted it imprecisely, the icing sliding a little at the edges, and she had put one candle in the center, and there was coffee already poured. She told me while we sat down. She said it plainly, the way she says things, that for 30 years, on the 13th of September, she had bought a small cake or a cupcake or whatever was at hand, and she had put a candle in it, and she had sung Happy Birthday alone in whatever apartment she'd been living in at the time. She said, "I just wanted you to know that." I did not say anything. There was nothing to say that would have been adequate, and I had stopped trying to fill silences that didn't need filling. We ate the cake. Outside her window, the light was doing the thing it does in October, that late afternoon amber that makes everything look like it's being remembered. And the street sounds came up from below, and the coffee was hot, and the cake was listing slightly to the left from the icing, and none of it was what I had grown up expecting a birthday to look like. I set my phone face down on the table. Anna reached across and touched my hand, briefly, just the tips of her fingers, and then she pulled back and picked up her mug. We sat there and watched the light change.